Season 9 is, by far, the most chaotic season of The Simpsons. Chaotic in terms of the characters' storylines, the overall direction of the season itself, and the reception by the fanbase. This is a year going off in so many different directions, with input from many different voices in production. Outgoing showrunners, Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, had 3 holdover episodes. Al Jean and Mike Reiss returned to produce 2 other holdovers, and David Merkin returned for 2 more. New showrunner Mike Scully took over the helm for the other 18 episodes. Because of its composition, it's a bit trickier in summarizing the overall vibe, that special flavor that defines the year as a whole. Thankfully, Ralph Wiggum came along and put things in perspective for us. I don't want to alarm you, but Season 9 tastes like burning. To be clear, I'm not strictly talking about all the fire in the season. Like seriously guys, you can't just keep setting something ablaze as a plot point in all your episodes. But maybe that's appropriate imagery, because Season 9 is a very fiery season in my opinion. It's not particularly down to earth like the early years, it isn't full of these soothing emotional moments, or these wispy cutaways and parodies. This is a season about conflict, about deception, about taking risks. The characters are extremely passionate about what they want, and are willing to do what's necessary to achieve these goals. The time for hugging and learning is officially over. As a result, this season is chock full of grifting, stealing, and manipulation in general. We have episodes like Bart, Carney, and the Joy of Sect, featuring antagonists trying to relieve Springfield of its money, and if that's successful, their houses too. Homer and Apu both try profiting off of something fantastical that falls into their laps. Or we have Marge learning the difference between the truth and the truth. Season 9 really loves highlighting the seedy underbelly of capitalism, the more artificial ways to make a living. That making money is often about how good of a story you can sell the public, and not from providing something they could actually use. Of course, we have plenty of stories that revolve around characters just straight up stealing stuff as a means to get ahead. Oh, how do I get more money to spend on my girlfriend? Insurance fraud. How can I have fun with Ralph? Hello, Mr. Skeleton Key. How can I curb government spending? Thanks for this $1 trillion bill. Oops, now Castro has it. Season 9 is so obsessed with theft that 4 different characters get their identity stolen, although in some cases willingly. Armin Tamzarian takes the place of Seymour Skinner, Apu takes over Homer's life, Homer pretends to be this guy, and Bart takes the fall for Nelson. Also, Homer uses Grandpa to get a helper monkey, but I don't know if this one counts. Basically, if you want sneaky, you're in the right place. These characters are not shy about taking risks, or trying to finesse their way through a challenging situation. Season 9's like the sketchier cousin of Season 6. Yeah, it's full of conspiracies and crime and stuff. This is another one of those Law & Order seasons. It's just less about the mystery and more about the hustle. More about trying to wrangle their way out of their mess. We're talking about a season where 4 different members of the Simpson family get arrested. I'm honestly not surprised the town thought they were being defrauded during Christmas, or that the government thought Homer hijacked a submarine, because it's been that kind of year. Money is obviously going to play a key factor in a lot of these stories. For the most part though, the Simpsons remained a middle-class family with not a crazy amount of money to burn. Like they're not going to have the funds for a fancy alarm system, gifted school for Lisa, or replacement Christmas presents. They're definitely not roughing it or anything, like in the early years. They seem pretty comfortably middle class at this point. The only thing Homer treats himself to is Snake's car, and we have no idea what that cost. Speaking of which, Season 9 really loves cars. It's like the hit-and-run developer's wet dream. Despite sitting through 2 Canyonero commercials, I had never noticed this trend before until this rewatch. The New York episode centers around recovering the family sedan. There are lots of chase scenes throughout the season. Then you have separate adventures with Moe's car and Snake's Little Bandit. The Simpson family get a new car during Christmas and immediately destroy it. Huh. Actually, almost all these cars get destroyed. Hey, wait a minute. Both Moe's car and the Christmas one end up under the water. And the school bus shares a similar fate. Even Homer's submarine ends up springing a leak. Maybe Season 9 doesn't taste like burning, maybe it tastes like drowning instead. Burning, drowning, and grifting. That's Season 9 for you. At this point, it wouldn't be surprising to suggest that Season 9 stories tend to be extremely plot-driven by nature. You're not going to find many introspective character pieces here. It's pretty much only Lisa the Simpson in that category, and that's a Season 8 holdover. Sure, they'll do character relationship stories still, like looking at Homer and Marge's marriage, or how Homer and Bart support each other. But even this relationship stuff tends to be more topical in nature. like both of those Homer Bart examples have a theme about exercising underscoring them. Lost Star Lisa isn't about Homer and Lisa trying to find common ground. The two end up connecting because Homer takes a principled stance about risk-taking. The characters are so comfortable with each other, we've seen Homer sabotage his marriage so many times, that we need this topical stuff to shake things up. Don't know if they needed to take it to this extreme, but this is generally the right approach for this era. I think Season 9 is a bit underappreciated in terms of its social commentary. It's got a nice mix of heavier political topics, lighter media criticism, and takedowns of specific industries. Even though they go for religious satire twice in 1 year, their individual approaches are entirely different. You get one looking at the external nature of religious organizations, asking what the line is between a church and a cult, and then you have a more philosophical story about faith itself, examining the relationship between individual people. The show certainly takes a stance in all their satires, like even in Lisa the Skeptic, they go after corporations in the end, but they're good about leaving some of these nebulous philosophical questions out there. Like in another episode, we understand that Springfield wants the original Skinner back, that he's the weenie they grew to love, but there's still that meta undercurrent in the background, asking what it is about change that's so intimidating. Season 9 remains just open-ended enough that there can still be debates about how right and wrong they were. Now granted, part of that feeling is caused by the way Season 9 ends its episodes. This is the beginning of an era marked by very, very subversive and almost nihilist endings to its stories, where they'll set up a problem that needs to be solved and eventually just sort of hand-wave it away with a joke, implying that the central problem wasn't that big of a deal after all. How will the kids get off the island? Oh, let's say mow. What should we do about the trash? Let's move 5 miles away. How will their neighbors eventually forgive them? They don't, they take all their stuff. Sitcom tropes are the enemy of Season 9, and they will do whatever possible to avoid them, even if it means burning down the plot. Now Season 7 and 8 were also very self-aware about sitcom tropes. Like they'll set up the Van Houten's divorce, and in the end, they don't get them back together. But they tended to back up that subversiveness with a relatively straightforward character journey, that Homer learns to value Marge. Season 9 is considerably more tongue-in-cheek about these character arcs. They're more likely to acknowledge, hey, maybe this isn't a Ralph achievement story. Bart really has no business being in the big game. Krusty being true to himself means selling out. The Simpsons love screw-the-audience jokes, and for better or for worse, Season 9 applies that attitude to character growth. In terms of its jokes as a whole, Season 9 takes a relatively balanced approach. Since so many showrunners got involved this year, we get a small taste of everything that came before. We get more parodies, references, and movies than in recent years, but never to the degree of the Gene and Reese era. On occasion, they'll slow things down, like in the Oakley and Weinstein days, and do some mundane observational humor, or they'll treat us to a genuinely awkward and cringe-inducing moment. In fact, they might have one of the most uncomfortable moments in the series' history. Oof, Krusty. I'd say Season 9 has the most in common with the David Merkin years overall, as they both tend to highlight subversive humor, including plenty of screw-the-audience jokes. Season 9 gets most of its mileage out of the crazy situations they've set up. They don't need to cut away somewhere else, because the plot is so cuckoo bananas already. They're less inclined to hang entire scenes on characters' quirky personalities, like how the park ranger guy or Don Brodka did in the past. Like Steve Martin doesn't show up to be a big personality, he's here to mix it up with Homer. Same as Helen Hunt with Moe. The jokes are either the characters dealing with the situation, or just straight up arguing with each other about it. It's like an exaggerated version of the old Merkin style, just more combative and snarky as a whole. Of course, we all know that Season 9's specialty is jokes about characters needing to pee. Or they'll go for a nice kick in the junk, or just start grabbing at parts of Homer's flesh. Yeah, I get why Season 9 has a reputation for being kinda lowbrow. But honestly, I don't think it's out of control or anything. It's still being done in moderation. Okay, maybe I'm wrong on this point. Anyway, Season 9 is often kicked around for the Principal Skinner thing in regards to its continuity, but I'd argue that as a whole, they do a nice job sprinkling in continuity nods here and there. They love having old characters show up in the background for a brief scene, or referencing specific plot points, like that Lisa and Nelson used to date, that Bart had an elephant, and that Homer has a heart condition. I like their approach here. It shows an attention to detail, that they're aware of what came before and can link up to old plot lines, In later seasons, they get really over the top about it, whereas here, it's just context. Sure, maybe the scene should be happening in a castle instead of a windmill, but I say it's nice that they remember the old mini-golf course. After a year of relatively few celebrities visiting Springfield, Season 9 shifted to an equal mix of guest stars playing themselves and new characters. This was a year where Joe Namath or U2 might show up randomly in Springfield, or a group of funny comedians and Jay Leno will do a show there. Maybe Marge will go on Jeopardy and get shaken down by the legend himself, Alex Trebek. The celebrity balance is on par with something like Season 4. There are still plenty of instances of showing off an original new character in Springfield, making them the focal point of the action. Martin Sheen, Jim Varney, Helen Hunt, and Steve Martin all provide wonderful performances that elevated their episodes. We did get the introduction of a few new regulars this year, including Duffman, Manjula, Gil, Cookie Kwan, and the Crazy Cat Lady. This is a pretty long list, all things considered, especially since Season 8 didn't bother adding anyone. In terms of the secondary cast, Season 9 represents a real changing of the guard, in that the Mr. Burns era is officially over. He stopped being that go-to character for cutaway jokes. There aren't really any power plant heavy episodes. He gets one spotlight episode, a C-plot that lasts like 2 scenes, and that's about it. No, Season 9 marks the beginning of the Mo Sizlak era. They absolutely love this guy. He's practically the Poochie this year. There are so many episodes where the plot pops into Mo's because they specifically need his input. They love making him a vocal member of the crowd. For a season with a lot of scheming, manipulation, and Homer in general, the rise of Mo is hardly surprising. Someone needed to be there to act as Homer's confidant. This is a pretty important year for Principal Skinner, and not strictly for controversial reasons. The writers put a lot of effort into his relationship with Agnes, pairing them together for several of his jokes. Similar to Mr. Burns in the power plant, there were relatively few Springfield Elementary plots, so Mrs. Krabappel got shoved aside in favor of these two bickering. Season 8 was arguably Agnes's big coming out party, but here's where they made her a star. Season 9 is also a very good year for the Springfield Elementary kids, specifically Milhouse, Nelson, and Ralph. They get to carry a lot of the action in episodes like Bart Starr, This Little Wiggy, and Das Bus. Nelson plays a very important role in all 3 of these stories, Ralph gets a spotlight in one of them, and Milhouse is generally the worst. Seriously, they should have just eaten him. However, I'd say the biggest winner of Season 9 is Apu, who gets both a spotlight episode and a dedicated B-plot. This might not sound like much, but he often ends up like Groundskeeper Willie, with a bunch of unfocused one-off moments in random episodes. The writers kept finding ways to get Apu or the Quickie Mart into the story. He doesn't have to join the Naval Reserve, but why not bring him along? Like, Apu is so essential to Season 9 that he'll keep showing up in Lisa's sax for no reason. Yes, I know the joke is how random it is. Season 9 is just randomly Apu's year. As for the Simpson family, Season 9 undoubtedly belongs to Homer. He's the main character in like half of the episodes, and in the other ones, like if the kids or Marge would dare to take the lead, they'll throw him a wacky B-plot. Characterization-wise, he takes an even more aggressive turn. This is where people start having the jerk-ass Homer debate, with him pointing guns and shaking birdcages and all. Also because he coins the term during this year. I think the charitable way to describe his characterization is that he's extremely enthusiastic in Season 9. When Homer finds a new passion, he goes all in. It's not enough to be supportive of Bart, he's got to be the most supportive coach ever. He's the #1 fan of the leader. Now he only eats food in bar form. Like Star Wars itself, there's definitely a dark side to enthusiast culture. It can be easy to lose perspective. Homer definitely tests the limit of his likability. I think that specific criticism is valid. But he's so darn passionate and upbeat the rest of the time that he still feels like the Homer we're used to. He's teetering on the edge. Marge is pretty hot and cold throughout Season 9. Like, there is some amazing Marge content scattered throughout these episodes. We get to see Marge as a badass, manipulating characters to get her way, and taking a stand when things spiral out of control. They don't forget about her naive and quaint side of her personality either. If you want corny mom jokes, we've got corny mom jokes. Unfortunately, there are so many stories where Marge's only job is to get on Homer's case or get dumped on in general. The writers aren't particularly nice to Marge sometimes. It's like, if Season 9 remembers Marge exists as an actual person, it portrays her extremely well. Otherwise, she's just the nagging machine. There's not a whole lot of middle ground this year. Bart faces a ton of judgment from others throughout Season 9, so we get a very image-conscious version of him. He has to deal with being quarterback, taking the lead on the island, becoming co-anchor on the news. Bart ends up in a tough spot in many instances, so he has to deal with solving his problems without making too many enemies along the way. However, when Bart isn't the focal point of the story, he mostly exists to support Homer's adventures. This year, not many instances of Homer supporting Bart's storylines. As for Lisa, well, I think this is a sneaky good year for her. Like Marge, she can fall into the background sometimes, but when they use Lisa, they get her right. We get the rational mini-adult version who wants to maintain order and talk about the issues, but they love highlighting the childish side of Lisa's personality, that she gets in over her head, gets into heated arguments, is totally up for an ice cream fight or playing Hot Wheels with her brother. They hit a nice balance of not constantly dumping on Lisa and not turning her into Little Miss Perfect. It's a more fiery version of Lisa than usual, and I'm here for it. I gotta say, rewatching Season 9 toward the end of 2020 made me appreciate its general perspective a little more. Like Season 8 felt like one giant party where we could bask in that cynically laid-back 90s attitude, here comes Poochie, whereas Season 9 is more manic by comparison. It has this sense of, holy crap, the building's on fire, someone save the beer. But I kind of enjoy what a giant mess the characters create for themselves. Season 9 is full of these scrappy people just trying to turn things around. They often fail, they usually don't get exactly what they wanted, but I respect the hustle. It's harsher and meaner than classic Simpsons, but you could also argue it's more brutally honest. And I get that Season 9 Tastes Like Burning is an overly incendiary statement to make, that it evokes the image of the Simpsons series burning to the ground. To be clear, I don't think that's true. But that's part of the debate surrounding it, that underlying question of, did the writers squeeze another golden era season out of the show, or have we officially moved on to something different? I think that's a debate for a different kind of video. However, to keep with this video's imagery, I would say that I can smell smoke right now. Season 9 is the beginning of several trends that will continue over the next few years. Let me know in the comments what you think of Season 9 and how you would categorize it. Public opinion is so all over the place that I'm interested in seeing where people stand on it now. I honestly can't tell if I've been too forgiving or too nitpicky towards Season 9 in this retrospective. Maybe both. I'll be back next time with my top 10 list, whenever I can finally settle on a pick for the best episode of the season. This should be a chaotic mess of a list, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As always, thanks for watching.